Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, prison contracts questioned. Also, Tuberville dismissal is appealed. And campaigns around the state are shaping up.
They're beginning to get on my nerves. Who are those guys?
Who are those guys? Well, we'll let you know when we find out. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Florida man of the hour, Josh Moon, investigative reporter at APR and columnist. How you doing?
Yeah, hey, listen, I gotta apologize to Tommy Tuberville. I see what the hype is about, man. It's great. It's great down here.
Yeah, I love Florida.
Yeah,
I'm particularly fond of Miami. I like going down to South Beach.
Yeah, we're on the Atlantic coast over here. I like a good strong ocean. It's a lot of fun.
It is a good thing. Well, I tell you what's not a lot of fun. Contract Review recently went over a prison contract with YesCare. They were the health care provider for Alabama prisons. Now, Josh, Susan, we know this. Before they ever signed the contract with YesCare, APR wrote about how this wasn't going to work out so well. And Josh, you specifically pointed out that this deal was going to go south, faster than Sherman. I mean, and it did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, in all fairness, this was Chris England's opinion, Representative Chris England. He told me, look, man, there's on our podcast, that's Alabama Politics This Week, check it out. But he told me, there's no way they can complete this contract. This company is going to go bankrupt. There's no way they can do this for this amount of money. They're going to shortchange us on the health care that they provide, and then ultimately they will not be able to fulfill this thing. And I mean, he's a prophet over here, but really, he just looked at what was taking place with the company. And what you could see, the different maneuvering, they were splintering off this portion and forming a new company in Texas and Alabama and Florida and renaming them and pulling out resources from this and pulling out resources from that and spinning this off into something else. And it's always a clear sign that there is financial trouble within the company. And there was no secret about this. They were on the verge of bankruptcy and going through some bankruptcies all before we signed this. We essentially bailed them out. Because we didn't have anybody who would take on this prison healthcare contract for what we were willing to pay for.
And Susan, it's not just that they didn't fulfill the contract. It's like they basically got, $15 or so million from the state, and the state's trying to recover the money not only from the bankruptcy where they didn't fulfill the contract, but also money they gave them to pay employees ahead of time that they didn't pay.
Right. When they started getting into trouble, of course, as Josh pointed out, from the very beginning, when we signed them on, they were already running from vendors. Okay, they were already running. But in that situation, they had asked the state to pay the $15 million up so they could do 2 payrolls. All right, so yes, they got the money, and yes, they paid the first payroll. But when it came to the second payroll, they didn't make that payroll and would not tell the state of Alabama where that money was spent.
Oh, they told them it went to other things.
Other things. That's yeah.
But basically,
and you can't do that.
England accused them of fraud.
Yeah.
Because they took the money and they didn't do what they said they were going to do with it. But this is really...
And the state itself is still on the line for that payroll.
the thing is this is indicative of how the system has been run, and surprisingly, Senator Tommy Tuberville, who wants to be Alabama's governor, did say that when he or if he becomes governor, he is going to try to address the prison systems. Now, I wish him all the luck in the world, but Josh, we have no historical evidence that any governor, and God bless her, Kay Ivey tried, but that any governor has ever really solved Alabama's prison problem.
Solved it. I don't know that anybody's ever made it any better whatsoever. I mean, it's just been this way for, all my life. It's been this way. All of my life, for 50 years, it's been horrible. It's been one of the worst prison systems in the country consistently. It's so bad that the Trump DOJ is currently suing us because it's that bad. You know how bad your prison's got to be before the Trump DOJ looks down and says, "Yeah, man, that's way too inhumane for us." I mean, it's unreal. And look, I think I'll say this, okay? I posted something nice about Tommy Tuberville on my Facebook page, and of course I took a lot of crap from liberals about this, and I get it. I get the distrust, I get the doubt, and all that stuff, okay? But it is a significant statement that the Republican nominee for governor has come out and said that some of these people who are running ADOC could possibly have be in jail at some point because of the way they're operating. Okay, that is a significant statement from the person who wants to be there, because all along through this, we have been fighting with Republicans and the establishment that run this state, who have insisted that the only reason that there's a problem is because these soft on crime liberals are out here saying that there's one. Okay, and that is clearly not the case. People are dying every single day, and let me tell you something. This healthcare contract, and I'm probably going to get some information to write about some of this stuff here in the coming weeks. This healthcare contract and the way YesCare handled that and the way they failed to fulfill a lot of their duties has probably cost more lives.
Right, and then add on to that, now they've hired NAFCare, again, a no-bid contract for $500 million to finish out the 2.5 years that YesCare was on. So they're just mistake upon mistake upon mistake over and over and over,
right.
And somewhere this has got to stop.
Well, and I think, listen, I don't know that Tommy Tuberville will be governor. People say it's likely, but he has started addressing some issues that are Alabama-centric instead of Muslims and Sharia law and all that nonsense. But it needs to be addressed. I think Governor Ivey, again, my personal opinion, has done as good a job as anybody has done, but nobody has ever been able to solve the problem, because we do not care about the people that are incarcerated. We care more about the politics and optics of caring about the people who are incarcerated.
Each legislator should be required to tour at least one Alabama prison.
Until somebody at the top is held accountable, none of this will change. None of it will change.
You're right.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Your property is your home, your investment, and your legacy. Across the country, scammers are filing fraudulent deeds, often without the owner knowing until it's too late. REACT is a free alert system. If a document is filed using your name or tied to your property, you'll be notified within 24 hours.
Property fraud is a crime, and the faster we know it, the faster we can act.
Sign up today. Protect your property, protect your legacy.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. Follow it.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. This past week, a appeal was made to the Alabama Supreme Court by the two plaintiffs who have accused Tommy Tuberville of not meeting the residency requirement to run for governor, the 7-year prior to the election residency challenge. Now, I've read news report after news report after news report that said they are asking the Supreme Court to hear the residency challenge. The only people who reported this correctly was APR that I've been able to find. And what they asked the court was to look at Judge Reed's dismissal of the case and whether there was a venue, was she wrong, or is there really a role for that court? If not, what court? So it's a very narrow question. If she doesn't have jurisdiction in the judiciary to hear this, who does? And that is the first hurdle that they're going to have to overcome. And that's where the case stands at the moment. So Susan, they're not asking about his residency. They're asking, well, if the circuit court in Montgomery is not the proper venue, then where is the proper venue? Because Judge Reed said she wasn't sure, but she said there should be a proper venue to hear this case.
Right, and one of the big problems that they're having with this case is most of the time quo warranto, I can't say that.
Quo warranto.
Yeah,
Warranto.
is used against an official that is already serving, all right, not against a nominee. Although she said this should be included, they can't find case law to show where you can invoke this for a nominee. And so what Barry Ragsdale is doing is asking the Supreme Court, okay, if not her venue, then whose? Because this has to be something that we can adjudicate if we feel like the person is not qualified. This appeal is not about Tuberville. It is not about his residency. It is simply about how do we figure out a way how do we figure out in a way of the law to get an answer to this question.
We need an answer to, okay, if not there, Josh, where? Because there should be some mechanism, right? A logical mechanism of how you say, we need evidence that this individual lives here.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I would be honestly, after thinking about it for a while, I know the popular opinion here is that the Republican exclusive Republican Supreme Court is just going to toss this out because that's what's most beneficial to the Republican candidate at this point. But I'm not so sure because it's very rare that justices or judges pass up an opportunity to truly set a precedent on something. And I think that's what they have in this case right here is as an opportunity to issue out an opinion that lays out kind of a framework for a constitutional challenge and whether or not the courts play any sort of a role in that sort of a challenge. We know about the party challenges that come prior to the primary. We know about the post-primary challenge that comes with the party right after certification within 24 hours. And we know about the post-election challenge that can come before the legislature. The question is whether or not, because this is a constitutional question, all right? These laws are within our Constitution right now. And the question is whether or not this can be put forth before a neutral arbiter of the facts, a court of law somewhere, and say, hey, does this person, we believe this. Now, I understand the arguments on the other side, which is just to say, this opens the door, it's going to be the Wild West. We'll have everybody challenging everybody. And I think that's why the court may do this, is to look at this and say, no, here are these narrow set of facts that must be determined. Here's where you can do this. Here's the time period in which it can be done. Or hell, they could just say, no, listen, the courts don't have any role in that. But I don't think, it's hard for me to imagine a bunch of judges saying that the courts will have no standing to determine a matter of constitutional law. And that's, maybe they will, but I don't know. It seems odd to me.
And that seems to be at the root of this. When the Constitution sets a standard and that standard is challenged, there has to be some avenue to challenge and to make sure that the Constitution says what it means what it says. And that's where we're failing here. And I got an email. Guy I don't know. He sent me an email and said, I'm confused. He said, I've lived over here in such and such a city for 16 years. And I've got a mountain of evidence that I live here. This is my domicile. My stuff's here. I sleep here. My dog's here. He said, I got all kinds of stuff. He said, why is it so difficult for any candidate to go, here's my stuff. And not just the tax records, not just that, but they do this by saying, well, they'll use it against him. What? You can come in the Brit House and there's nothing in here you can use against me unless you want to hit me in the head with a baseball bat.
Right. Well, I think the argument on the other side is, and listen, I'm not just limiting this to Tommy Tuberville, but let's say a Democrat down the line.
It doesn't have to be about Tuberville.
Right. It's a Democrat down the line somewhere. I think the argument on the other side is what's good enough. What is good? I mean, we know if we're challenging the other three things that are required of a gubernatorial candidate, his birth certificate or whatever will prove the age. His birth certificate will prove his citizenship and that sort of thing. So we know those things are pretty easy to identify. But how do you prove somebody lives where they say they live? What's good enough to prove that? Is it just simply tax returns? Is it showing a deed with your name on it? Is it showing, what sets that standard, I think, is where the argument lies on this one. And listen, having gone through the David Cole case up in North Alabama, I understand the complications that can arise. You can get to an answer, okay? You can get there. There's no problem in that. And you're right in what you're saying, that most people can say, here's all my stuff, man. I live here, clearly, Yeah. But there are a handful of folks who have a house at a beach, a house on the lake, that you could make a case. Right now there's a question about a school board member in Montgomery. And, people get into sticky situations in their families sometimes, and where it's not necessarily clear. And so I think this goes back to our earlier point. A court needs to set some precedent for this and determine what's doing, because it's in our Constitution.
And again, in my standpoint, and I've said this to the Tuberville people who do not want to accept what I'm saying, I don't care if Tommy Tuberville is legitimate or illegitimate. It is not personal. I want the Constitution followed. And I'm going to take just a little bit longer to say, one of the things that was thrown at me was, well, he's been a senator, so do you think he was an illegitimate senator? No, because the Constitution says you have to be an inhabitant on the day.
The U.S. Constitution.
U.S. Constitution says you have to be an inhabitant of the state when you run for Congress. Mm-hmm. It has no barrier when you run for Senate. There's no barrier. One day, 45 seconds, whatever it is, you have to be an inhabitant. Mm-hmm. And an inhabitant is different than domicile or citizen resident. We're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Your property is your home, your investment, and your legacy. Across the country, scammers are filing fraudulent deeds, often without the owner knowing until it's too late. REACT is a free alert system. If a document is filed using your name or tied to your property, you'll be notified within 24 hours.
Property fraud is a crime, and the faster we know it, the faster we can act.
Sign up today. Protect your property, protect your legacy.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. follow it.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. I meant to get into a little bit more of this earlier, but Tommy Tuberville is getting out on the campaign trail. He's speaking to groups. He's going to associations and making his pitch for governor. And one of his big packages right now that he's pitching is public safety. So I wanted to get that in there. He is on the trail. And so is Doug Jones. Now, Tommy Tuberville is talking about he wants to hire more troopers. He wants to make sure there are troopers on the road. He's talking about doing more corrections. And basically he's saying running a law and order type campaign at this point. I mean, he gave another speech in the Senate saying that the Muslims were going to take us over. So he's got a lot of this, but he's starting to form what his election message might be. Right now, it looks like law and order is his focal point at this point. Doug Jones is out there, and he is he's not the front runner. Tuberville's the front runner, but Doug Jones, Susan, is out there talking about kitchen table issues more than anything else.
Yeah, he's talking about, organized labor. He's talking about education, educational opportunities, workforce opportunities, and how to build that into the existing system we have now to address what is inflation, what is, food insecurity for children, a lot of really big issues that we have in a lot of Alabama homes.
I mean, Josh, I know that people are making excuses for the high price of fuel. Diesel fuel is through the roof. Gas is
What happened, Bill? What happened to the fuel prices? What happened to those fuel prices?
We started a war, or we didn't, but Donald Trump started a war in Iran under the pretense that they had nuclear weapons, or they were making nuclear weapons.
Even though we'd gotten rid of it 4
that
months
we'd already blown up. But now
how's that
it's
going?
about...
How's that going?
Now it's not going well, because now it's about keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, which wasn't closed until we fired missiles at them.
Yeah,
but
and listen, there was this fella a ways back that entered into this deal with Iran, and it seemed like a pretty good deal. It was a much better deal than the one that we did. I can't remember his name. It was something, Barack or something. But anyways, listen, look, you're right about everything that you said there, and I think that some of Tuberville's stuff was very good. I agree. I think it worked very well with the sheriff. I'm good friends with Derek Cunningham in Montgomery, and I know one of his big complaints has been mental health, and Tuberville touched on some of that and improving the mental health and getting some of those guys out of county jails. Which they're overrun with, and they're not trained to deal with them, and us asking them to do that is crazy. But a lot of it lacks detail. A lot of it lacks the specifics. Where I think we have talked at length on our podcast, and I'd welcome Tommy Tuberville to come on our podcast, Alabama Politics This Week, anytime he would like, and we'll talk to him in specifics as well. But Doug Jones talked about this, and one of the big things was data centers, and he gave this point of view on data centers, what would be his policy, which was kind of expanding on what Tuberville said, which is, look, we're going to have data centers, guys. I mean, we're going to need them for our future, and they're very important, but we need to do it responsibly. And Doug went into a number of different things about, having groups there to oversee them and how we could monitor them, and things that we needed to make sure from a governmental standpoint that are done to protect the communities and to protect consumer prices. And those are things that are very important. And along with those kitchen table issues about expanding Medicaid and furthering our rural hospital funding and doing things that will really help us out in the healthcare place, because right now we're getting crushed, and we're getting crushed by that bill that Tommy Tuberville signed on to, that big, beautiful bill, because we're just now starting to feel the effects of these healthcare increases. And what's happening right now with folks dropping off the ACA and Obamacare and sending prices through the roof, we're going to feel that for generations to come if something isn't done really quickly.
And what we now are looking like in Iran is another one of those wars of choice where it's a forever war, because they started a war on false assumptions. Let's say give them the benefit of the doubt. They were misled by Benjamin Netanyahu, but now they're making excuses because they don't know how to end it.
Right.
They do not.
Back to what Josh was saying with the data centers and what how Doug Jones would approach it. And first of all, I always go to whether we're talking about troopers, whether we're talking about mental health, whether we're talking about data centers, how much is it going to cost and where's that money going to come from, first and foremost. But with like the data center approach, look at where we are. We just talked about the prisons. And that's where we just, cut and run real quick. We just make a quick decision and that ends up being a bad decision. Why don't we take this opportunity to take it a little slower so that we don't end up in the situation like we're in with Yes Care right now in the prison system? I mean, this is a good opportunity to start something fresh.
And I think smart people are thinking about the data centers. They're a fact of life. They're, you pick up your phone. You're going to need it.
There's a way to do those things responsibly. There are ways to do those things responsibly. As a matter of fact, the one in Montgomery right now that's run by Meta, it has 100% renewable energy. I know that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to jack up prices from time to time in the height of like a winter storm, for example. They could do that, but that's where our Public Service Commission comes in. There's the ones that's supposed to protect our consumers and make sure those costs aren't transferred onto them, and they've got to do their job.
Well, I think that's very right and very important. We don't have the time to get into it, but we'll just say this. Senator Shamari Figures is facing long odds after they reinstituted what was deemed by the Supreme Court illegal maps once, which became legal maps this year. They were illegal in 2024. They're legal today. So he's facing an uphill battle. But Josh, we got about 25 seconds. Polling shows that he's got a shot.
Oh yeah, he absolutely has a shot. In this climate, in this condition, as smart as a person that Shamari is, and people see that, he's a very personable guy who goes out. He's visited all of the counties in his district over the course of time, and he's talked with people who weren't on his side. And he's done things for them and shown those people what a real active politician will get out and do for you. Not just somebody who's relying on the little moniker beside their name, the little R beside their name to get things done. Like Terry Sewell, he goes out and works, and that makes a difference for people.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.